The labor theory of value was first created by classical economists like Smith, Malthus, and Ricardo. And it says that the price of an item, on average, is equal to the amount of labor that it takes to make the item. It didn't deny that the price of an item could vary because of supply and demand over the short run, but in the long run it was determined by the amount of labor it took to create the item. This was picked up by Marx and perverted to suggest that the cost of anything that was above the labor cost was exploitation of the workers. Not surprisingly, Milei has contempt for both ideas. This first clip is Milei talking about Adam Smith and the labor theory of value.
Strictly, if it had not been for Smith's obsession with the equilibrium of stationary state, in which almost rent disappears, equaling the price with the average cost, pushing it to be wrong, embracing the theory of labor value, which is not necessary to achieve that result.
I'm a little more forgiving of the classical economists than Milei. I think that the reason they ended up with the labor theory of value is that they were trying to look for a unit of measure that was objective in the science of economics. Imagine trying to do physics, architecture, or engineering with a unit of measure such as length that varies, which it did at one time. The unit of length of foot was the length of a king's foot. Clearly, this makes it impossible to do any real science. But they noticed that currencies, even gold, were not that stable over time, which meant they had to find a stable measure of value in order to do real science. This is where the ideas of Malthus come in. And by the way, Malthus was correct of all of human history until he wrote his paper. Even Milei has to admit that that was true. And what he said was that the food supply always grows slower than the population. In other words, if there's any extra food, population expands to take it up, which leads directly to the iron law of wages. People cannot work below a subsistence level for any length of time or they die. And if it gets above that level, then the population expands until they're back to the subsistence level of wages. This leads directly to the labor theory of value. If a product sells for more than the labor cost, then that's profit, which will cause people to expand the number of people producing it, which will cause the population to increase until there's no profit above the labor that is necessary to produce it. By the way, classical economists meant all labor, including mental labor, unlike the Marxists, who thought that it was only physical labor that counted, which means that Marxists deny our essential feature as human beings, our ability to reason. I would say the labor theory of value classical economists came up with is just a logical consequence of Malthus's ideas and the attempt to come up with an objective standard to measure things against in economics. But what evidence do I have for this? Well, Smith in Wealth of Nations suggested that over the long run, pricing rent in corn or wheat is more stable than gold. I remember when I read this, I was very surprised by it. But I think this shows that he's trying to find an objective measure of value, as this quote shows. In this clip, Milei discusses Keynes' labor theory of value, which appears to be essentially the same as the Marxist labor theory of value.
He needed to determine the price level. And what did he do? He adopted the labor theory of value. When you go to chapter 21 of this fucking book, what it says is that the prices are determined from the costs. That is an offense against the beginning of Menger's imputation.
So Keynes is arguing that the price is determined by the cost. He says this almost 50 years after Menger has developed marginal value. His argument against Menger is something about the marginal efficiency of capital, which I find specious at best. In this next clip, Milei talks about the Marxist theory of value, and he shows the absurdity, and he also points out that they're just talking about physical labor. Marxists ignore or deny mental labor. They deny the very essence of what it means to be a human. Their system is only appropriate for slaves and ants.
The origin in reality is a theory of the exploitation of Robertus and the plus values of Marx. Now, fundamental, it is based on something that is called the value of work theory. If things are worth for the amount of work used to make them, everything that is above that is exploitation according to them. There is a wonderful book by Eugene von Fomig called The Conclusion of the Marxian System. And it shows us that the Marxian system, or a Marxist system, does not make sense, that it is a failure, that it is a theoretical fraud. First, it is not true. It is not true that you only produce with physical labor. You use work, you use raw materials, you use capital. And above all, where he uses time. Therefore, it is false that you only produce with work, physical labor, and that you only have to pay back that work. The system would have to do the causation of the profit rate of all the companies, and they would all have to have the same capital work relationship. And that is not reality. That is, in some places more capital is used than work, and in others more work is used than capital. For example, look at what services are. Services are pure work. That is also wrong. Then, if you notice, if you are going to exchange things of the same value, it doesn't make much sense. It wouldn't make much sense to exchange. I guess you don't have gold ingots there and I have gold ingots. Why would you exchange one gold ingot for another gold ingot? You realize that it doesn't make sense. It seems quite silly. That is, it doesn't make sense. That is, it doesn't make sense. The labor value theory. He changed things that he valued differently, so that both sides come out winning. There is social cooperation. Another mistake that makes me furious is this. You see that it is in a mundity. Being left-wing is a mundo, it is and dirty life. I don't wish it on anyone. Being left-wing is dirty because you see that. I mean, look, if they are workers, they are exploited. Yes. If they are businessmen, they are exploiters. And if they don't have a job, they suffer from unemployment. All life is a horrible thing. I don't know, at least to have a good time. To be liberal. I mean, but look at the contradiction. Because this is the most fun of all. I mean, what is technological progress? Well, that he produces certain quantity with a certain amount of labor. And what is technological progress? That he can, with the same amount of effort, produce much more. I mean, I imagine that you will realize that it is not the same to work with a tractor than to do it by hand, right? Then the central point is clearly that technological progress saves work. Now I ask you, because technological progress is also driven by businessmen, so they are a bunch of idiots. Because imagine they were doing so well, exporting people, and now they do things that don't exploit people. I mean, they don't realize that there is a contradiction in the terms. I mean, because they look like the army of the elites. The leftists, because they hate technological progress. I mean, they start with the fact that they don't see the work for everyone. Do you know that if that were true, and ye set the date in the year 1800, today the unemployment rate, if it were true, what the left wing would say would be 87.5%. They are crazy. That's not the case. I mean, the kids have a problem with the data. They have a problem with the data. I mean, that's why Freeman was lethal with that. He said, first the data, first the data. Well, they can't bear the data. I mean, not only the left wing. The socialists of good manners can't bear the data either. But apart from there, I want to tell you, it's more, for example, in the world of the labor value theory, there are no breaks. Because if you can put a price above the cost, that's it, the problem is over. And that's false. I mean, in real life, there are breaks. So the question is, if we are clear that from a theoretical point of view, this theory fails, if we are clear that the values they embrace are immovable, because precisely, if it failed empirically and fails theoretically, why do they continue to support it? They continue to support it because they have to defend the theory of exploitation.
Marxists Labor theory of value is key to their concept of exploitation. And their theory of exploitation rests on the idea that human beings are not rational beings. They're not beings with the ability to think. They're just mechanical automatons. They're no different than a machine. This is what they think of people. They think that people are just machines. And these are the monsters who claim that they are for human rights. Milei also points out, under the labor theory of value that Marxists purport, there's no justification for an exchange. You're exchanging two things that have the same amount of labor and therefore are valued equally by both of you. Milei also points out that technological progress is incompatible with the Marxist labor theory of value. Technological progress reduces the amount of labor necessary for the same amount of output. And the businessmen just make money off of exploiting labor. Thus, if there's less labor used, then they can exploit fewer people. That means they make less money. Thus, it makes sense that Marxists hate technological progress. Note that they're always trying to hamper technological progress with regulations and laws, which is the whole point of the Marxist environmentalist movement. So Marxists treat human beings as unthinking automatons. Not surprisingly, they hate technological progress because it's based on the ability to reason. They don't give any value to the ability to reason. This is not surprising when you realize Marxism is based on Immanuel Kant and Hegel's ideas. And Kant said, I found it necessary to deny knowledge to make room for faith. And Hegel just goes to full irrationalism. Thus, the Marxist theory of exploitation is based on the idea that we have no ability to reason. It's anti-reason, which is the very basis of the nature of human beings. Therefore, it's anti-human. Milei's done a good job of destroying this absurd idea. Long live freedom, damn it.